served in the Department of Exiting the European Union. I speak of Conservative MP and Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, who joins me now. Good to have you on. So we look at something that we had. We had an oven-ready deal. We were going to get Brexit done. We had Brexit shows coming and going like football managers. We even had the bizarre Malthouse Compromise at one point. But we finally got it over the line. Foreign Secretary, how did the PM pull it off? Good morning.
Nick, good morning. Look, it was all those things that you rattled through there in your introduction, I think were necessary milestones in getting to where we've ultimately got to. We departed from the European Union at the beginning of 2020 with the withdrawal agreement. And it was inevitably going to be the case that we needed to put arrangements in place for our trading relationship with the EU. And the protocol addressed the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland. But we could see that it wasn't working. The people of Northern Ireland were telling us that it wasn't working. It was constricting trade from GB to Northern Ireland, and it was very much the concern of the representatives of the unionist community that decisions could be made which affected them, over which they had no democratic control. That's what we sought to deal with, and it was through engagement, negotiation by myself, Chris Heaton-Harris, and the Prime Minister that we got this resolved, and we've now got something which addresses those concerns of the communities and politicians in Northern Ireland.
No one can dispute a single word you've just said, Foreign Secretary, that it wasn't working. So what should we what should we think of the person who told us that it would work and it was oven ready, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson? Did he let us down? How should he be regarded now in this particular aspect of his leadership?
Well, Boris was instrumental in actually delivering that 2016 mandate to leave the European Union. And if that hadn't happened, a lot of the things that we've been working on would have been moot points anyway. So I absolutely pay tribute to the fact that
I hear what you say, but then he rather landed us in it afterwards. Did he not, Foreign Secretary?
Well, look, we had to do a load of work to make our departure from the European Union both meaningful, but also to make sure that it didn't disrupt trade within the United Kingdom's internal market between Northern Ireland and GB. He put a set of proposals forward. Many elements of those proposals worked very, very well, but there were certain really, really important elements that were causing significant problems, and we have focused relentlessly on addressing those problems. So now it means that goods from GB are available in Northern Ireland. It means that things which are not ultimately destined for Ireland and destined for the EU can travel to Northern Ireland just as easily as they can within GB. And the really, really important bit is that the elected representatives of the people of Northern Ireland will have a say through the Stormont break on things which might affect them. And that's incredibly important.
As you reference the Stormont break, can I ask you, Foreign Secretary, how confident are you the DUP will support the Windsor framework?
Well, I mean, ultimately the decision is for them. But what I would very much say, and this echoes the point that the Prime Minister was making at the dispatch box yesterday, we listened very, very carefully to the voices of the DUP and the other unionist parties in Northern Ireland, because they highlighted specific concerns that affected the communities that they represented. We listened very, very carefully and systematically went through those concerns to address those concerns, including the availability of GB products in shops in Northern Ireland, including making sure that the representatives were able to genuinely have a voice on behalf of the people they voted for. So we've worked through that. I really, really hope they'll recognise how much work that we've done to address those concerns. And to be fair, how much the European Union has moved in order to address those concerns as well. And I really hope that will give them the confidence to go back into the power sharing executive.
Why do you suppose the European Union has travelled so far?
A number of reasons. I think that there was a recognition that the concerns that we were raising and the concerns being raised by the unionist community and their representatives particularly were not confected. This wasn't performative. This was because there were real world problems that needed to be addressed. I think that some of the concerns that the EU were trying to protect themselves from, particularly with regard to their own single market, I think they could see, because the arrangements have been in place for a couple of years, that some of their concerns weren't coming to fruition, and that meant that they could be a bit more flexible. I think we've demonstrated that we're a very active, engaged European country through our response to Ukraine. I think there's a whole load of things.
Well, I wonder if personality enters it, Mr. Cleverly, because you are far closer to these people than I am, but I have to say there seemed a genuine warmth between the Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen, in a sense that I'm sure there was a kinship between Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, but there was a genuine warmth, seemed to be more on display yesterday than I'd seen in other leaders, Mr. Cleverly.
Well, look, you have to have a good working relationship with the people that you're negotiating with. The negotiation it's not a competition. It's not a sporting event. It is something which is designed to generate benefit on both sides of the negotiating table. And I think if you can go into a negotiation with that spirit, and certainly in the conversations that I've had with my European opposite number, Maros Sefcovic, I've always tried to maintain that tone. I think the fact we weren't giving a running commentary, I think the fact we weren't kind of criticising each other through social media really meant that we could have proper, pragmatic, grown-up conversations about the issues that we needed to address and how we went about addressing them. Right. And I think that was reflected in the body language between President von der Leyen and the Prime Minister.
Last couple of things on this. Does it matter which way Bojo might go on the Windsor framework, as in Boris Johnson?
Well, I really hope that he will realise that the concerns that he has expressed, which very much echo the concerns I was hearing from communities in Northern Ireland, have been addressed. So I really, really hope that we can get the fullest range of support for this, because it really does focus on the areas that were highlighted to me as areas that needed fixing.
Okay. As Foreign Secretary, you may have insight on this. Why was it deemed correct for the King to meet with Ursula von der Leyen? Some people are expressing concern about this and politicisation of the monarch. Mr. Cleverly.
See, I genuinely don't understand that argument. The other week, President Zelensky came to the UK, and as a senior international guest, he had an opportunity to have an audience with His Majesty the King. It is not unusual for our head of state to have meetings with
Ukraine wasn't involved
senior...
in a possible schism within the United Kingdom, of course. One could argue that.
Well, yeah, but the point is, Ursula von der Leyen is a very senior international representative. It is therefore not unusual, as part of our hospitality to international guests, part of our being a good host, to facilitate a meeting with His.
It was the government's idea, was it?
Well, of course, it was our invitation to Ursula von der Leyen to come to the UK to finalise this deal with the Prime Minister. So, of course, that was a conversation we had with the Palace. Ultimately, diary arrangements are the final decision, of course, on the availability of His Majesty is with the Palace. But, of course, we were the ones that invited her to the UK. But as I say, it is not unusual for the monarch to meet senior international dignitaries, and Ursula von der Leyen is a senior and important international dignitary.
Last couple of things as Foreign Secretary, and indeed this touches on our earlier conversation. The new IRA has seemingly admitted responsibility for the attempted murder of the high-profile police officer in Northern Ireland. How concerned should we be about the actions of the so-called new IRA?
So firstly, I'd like to send my thoughts to the friends and family of DCI Caldwell. From everything I've heard, an outstanding servant of the people of his community, both within his job at the PSNI, but also as a volunteer. Of course, we take internal threats to the UK security seriously, particularly so in Northern Ireland, and I know that the security services and the police services of Northern Ireland will take very seriously the preservation of peace and security in Northern Ireland. I can't really go further.
Okay. China must be challenged over its denials that the COVID pandemic might have been caused by a leak from one of its laboratories, an expert warned last night. The call comes amid fears Britain is turning a blind eye to the latest evidence, much coming from the United States, because Britain does not want to upset Beijing. You turning a blind eye to the cause of COVID, Foreign Secretary?
So the conversations that I've had with senior representatives of the Chinese government, I never shy away from highlighting the areas where we disagree, and I have direct and robust conversations with them. So I've not seen the detail of that report. My understanding is that report came in overnight, so I've not seen the details of that report. I will, of course, look at that. I'm going to the G20 in Delhi later on today, and I will almost certainly have conversations with my Chinese opposite number, and if there are details that need to be addressed, then I will raise them.
Are you of the belief that it was a leak from the lab in Wuhan, China, COVID?
So look, I don't think it's healthy to speculate. I've not seen the details of this report, so I don't know what evidence base that headline is derived from.
All right. Finally, I'm sure you've had some input on this. Two unfortunate problems in the settlements on the West Bank, on the main road leading to Nablus. Buildings and cars damaged by fire, tear gas canisters littered, Israel military patrols keeping unofficial curfew. Some people reporting it's the highest level of violence in that part, for some time. How concerned is it hotting up in this area again, Foreign Secretary?
Well, I have spoken with my counterparts in the region, and we, of course, are trying to encourage de-escalation. We are trying to encourage restraint. I will continue to engage directly with the Israeli authorities, the Palestinian authorities, and the other countries in the region to try and de-escalate the situation there. It's in nobody's interest to see these localised disturbances, and we certainly don't want them to spill over more widely. So we'll continue working internationally to try and encourage peace and de-escalate.
Grateful for your time. Thank you, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, appearing here on LBC 3 minutes after 8. Let's get the latest news.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.